All right, tonight we begin in Matthew 19. We're now entering into a new phase in the life of Jesus, a very interesting phase. You remember when we started out, we talked about Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell about the life of Jesus in what part of the country? You remember? Matthew, Mark, and Luke, what part of the country do they emphasize? Galilee, up and around Galilee, and then John emphasizes down in Judea. Now then tonight, Jesus is getting ready to leave Galilee. And as he leaves Galilee, he'll not return there again until after his resurrection. He's going to go down into that area down there that's called Perea. If you notice, it says, and it came to pass when Jesus had finished these words, he departed from Galilee and came into the borders of Judea beyond the Jordan, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. So now Jesus is getting ready to go from Galilee back down to Judea. As you look at it, there's a line, the line that he would take if you went down. That's the closest line to go. But something has already happened in the life of Christ that we haven't talked about in Luke the 9th chapter. And that is that Jesus was headed down to Jerusalem, and he sent his disciples on, and when they got down to Samaria, the Samaritans wouldn't let them pass through. Anybody remember why? Stopped them. Can't go any farther. Because they had their face set toward Jerusalem. What problem was that? They had their face set toward Jerusalem. In other words, they were traveling south. They were going to Jerusalem. And the Samaritans said, you're not going to Jerusalem, through our country. Now the reason for that is because of the animosity that there was between the Samaritans and the Jews. And of course the Jewish headquarters would be down at Jerusalem, and when the people up in the Galilee area would head down, they would go through that land, and the Samaritans counted that as an insult, passing through our land to go down to Jerusalem here. So they wouldn't let them pass through. Now this is where James and John wanted to turn to the Lord and wanted to know, do you want us to bring fire out of heaven and just kill them? In other words, they were ready to really do something about this. The interesting thing is that John was right in with that. Now, when you think about John, what do you think about? What word is generally attached to John? Love. He's the apostle of love. He talks more about love than any of the others. But here, he wanted to just call fire out of heaven and just kill them there. But Jesus didn't do that. So, as a result, this animosity that the Samaritans had with the Jews, then the normal way was that they would come on down this way and cross over the Jordan River and go down through Perea, then go up through Jericho over to Jerusalem. So they would go around Samaria. Now, when they got ready to go home, they would take a straight path and go back home. That was okay with the Samaritans. As long as they weren't going to Jerusalem, they could go back there. Way back at the very beginning, we find that that is where Jesus went when he met the Samaritan woman in our first few lessons, headed back up in that particular direction. Now then, here's where we find that Jesus is. We back it up, and here it is. He's down here around Jericho. He's down in a country called Perea. Now, Perea is not found in the Bible. That country is not found in there. That name is not found there. In the Old Testament, that country was called Gilead. And everybody understands that name, Gilead. But by the New Testament times, the country of Gilead had changed its name to Perea. And the Josephus and some of the others tell us about it. And at this time, the Jews claimed to own that country. In other words, that was an annexation of their territory. Now, their country always stopped at the Jordan River. They couldn't go any farther on the other side, but at this period of time, since it was so close, they felt that it was over there. It's a very beautiful part of the country, and this is where Jesus goes down and he stops. Now that would be the area where John the Baptist was doing his baptizing. That would be the area where Jesus went to start his ministry when he went down and was baptized of John. So he's coming back down now, and he's stopping there. Now, the best that we can figure out, the people who do a lot of studying about this, is that Jesus is going to spend the next 5 months there. He will spend 5 months in here. This will be where he is when Lazarus dies, and Mary and Martha sends for him, and he comes up from that area and comes up to raise Lazarus. Then he goes back down. So for about a 5-month period of time, he spends in that particular area. Then he will be going up into Jerusalem for the last week of his life, and he will be put to death. Of course, after he's raised from the dead, then he will go back up to Galilee. Go back up there and meet the 12 apostles then at the Sea of Galilee. But for right now, that's where it is. Now, here's the situation of where he is right now. He has made 2 trips down to Jerusalem so far, going down for the Pentecost celebrations, and they have begun to hate him down there. And now then, as he's coming down and they hear that he's coming again, his popularity is so high that they now are going to challenge him. This is where the Pharisees and even the Sadducees will make a trip over, and they're going to get some questions that they think they can trick him up. If they can ask him some questions and find him in some contradictions, then they can show that he's not really who he claims to be. So while he's down here then, why, these are the things that's going to happen. Now the first thing that they're going to be talking about is their Pharisees are going to come over, and they think that they can trap him on the subject of divorce, of whether you can get a divorce or not. After that, Jesus is going to teach them about little children. There'll be some parents bringing little children for him to pray over, and he will have another lesson on that. Then the rich young ruler will come to him down at this area, and that's where he's going to ask him, what good thing must I do? And then Jesus will take that opportunity and do some teaching on riches. Here's what riches are all about, and here's how hard that they are to handle. And then he'll talk about the laborers in the vineyard then, and give a parable about that. So now we're getting ready for a period of controversy, I guess you would say, as he's getting back down into the Jewish headquarters that are down there now. So now, as we start out here, in chapter 19, verse 3 then, it says this. By the way, something I didn't mention was in verse 2. Let me start out, and there's a couple of things I'll point out. In verse 1, and it came to pass, when he had finished the words, he departed from Galilee and came into the borders of Judea, beyond the Jordan. Now, beyond the Jordan means on the other side of the Jordan. That would be the eastern side of the Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. So he's still doing a lot of healing down in that area. So now the Sadducees come, and they're going to try to trap him. They're going to ask him about divorce. It said, and it came to pass when Jesus had finished these words, in verse 3, and there came unto him Pharisees testing him. That is, trying him, putting him to the test, trying to find something wrong with him, and saying, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Now, we must understand the background of that generation of people. There was a great controversy about whether a man could put his wife away for any and all reasons, or whether it was only for adultery. Now, this was a great controversy. It had been going on for 1,600 years. And they had 2 major rabbis at that time. They had one, Hillel, who was a liberal, and he said, you can put your wife away for any cause. And he would go back and quote Deuteronomy 24, that if a wife doesn't find any favor in a man's eyes, then he can write her a bill of divorcement and send her away. And he said, now, this gives the man the right to divorce her for whatever reason. And he said it can be for burning the bread when she's cooking that. It can be for spinning in the street, going out and kind of dancing and making a little fool of herself out there publicly, embarrassing him in a public way. Any reason, a man can put his wife away. Now then, there was another very popular rabbi, Shammai, and he said, no, you can only divorce your wife if she has committed adultery. That's the only reason you can divorce her. Now, remember, adultery and fornication, we've talked about these things before. What's the definition of fornication? It's any illicit sex act. What's the definition of adultery? It's one person in the act has to be married before it's considered adultery. All right, now, he said it's only for adultery. If she goes out and commits adultery, then, back in Deuteronomy 24, Moses said then that you can give her a bill of divorcement and you can put her away. So they come to Jesus, and they're trying him. They're not the slightest bit interested in what the truth is on this. They know this. Whatever way Jesus answers this question, he's in trouble. Because if he says yes, then they're going to say, well, then what about, and they're going to take the other position. If he says no, and so he's going to be able to set the Jews against each other. You remember what Paul did in the Sanhedrin that time when he went in there, that he got up and he said, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, and so he started out, and then they all got in a big argument. Well, that's what they're going to try to do with Jesus here. They're going to try to get him all messed up in this thing. So let's see how he answers that. Remember, if he says yes, he's in trouble. If he says no, he's in trouble. You say, what do you mean by being in trouble? Either way he answers it, there's a big philosophical school there that's going to cause a lot of trouble. So instead of him saying yes or no, he's going to go to the Bible. He's going to go to the Scriptures. And he answered and said, have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Now, this word cleave really means glue. It's an idea of being so close that you're glued together. So a man's to leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. They will function as one, no longer as two. When God created man and woman, he gave man really half of what a total human being would need to find happiness on this earth. He did that physically, and he did that emotionally and socially, and as far as the mind is concerned. Then he created woman. He said it's not good that man should be alone. He created woman. And in woman, he really gave her the other half. Now, when you put them together, you have a total unit that can find happiness, of where they can procreate, they can dwell together in happiness, they can fulfill each other's emotional and social needs. And so he's saying here that they shall become one flesh then. So they're going to become one unit. So that they are no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Now there's his answer. Not much room for argument in answering the Scripture, is there? And when he comes down, his conclusion then is whatever God hath joined, let not man put asunder. Will they be able to argue with that? If God has done something, is it reasonable that man can undo it? See? Decide, no, that's not the way we want it. So he just gave them a Bible answer. Now, they know they're caught. They know now that their trip has been in vain, but they have one more thing that they're going to ask him. They're going to ask him something now, and this is going to be a new thing. Now they're going to try to get him to contradict Moses. And so if they can get him to contradict Moses, then they've got him. What would that generation of Pharisees had done had Jesus said Moses is wrong? Can you imagine? At that time, no, Moses is wrong. See? So they say unto him, why then did Moses command to give her a bill of divorcement and put her away? So now they throw it in there. You said man can't put her away for every cause. Why did Moses give us that right? Now remember, it's can you put her away for every cause? This is what they're arguing about. Why then did Moses give her that right, give us that right? And what is it we have to do? What really is the only thing that Moses bound on us that we've got to do? Is give her a bill of divorcement. Now what is a bill of divorcement? It is a written statement. That's all it is. It is a written statement. I, Lowell Williams, born at a certain time, a certain place, do hereby put away my wife, Helen Williams, on a certain date in front of these witnesses, and I have to give her a bill of divorcement. And in that bill of divorcement, I have to state the reason. Because she's constantly burning the toast. I have warned her and warned her and warned her and warned her, and she keeps doing this. And so you must give her this bill of divorcement, and then you can put her away. Now, this is what they are coming back then to say. That's what Moses said then. Now, verse 8, and he saith unto them, Moses, for your hardness of heart suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it hath not been so. Now, he said, Moses permitted you to put away your wives, but from the very beginning of creation, that is not what God wanted to be done. It's not what God wanted to be done. Now, he said in here, so he's going to explain to them what God's plan is, what God wanted to be done. Moses gave you the law, it's a new law, to give a bill of divorcement. And why would that be something good for a woman? Why would that be a protection for a woman? What's that woman going to do when she's divorced? What work did a woman have at that time? See, she's going to go out and get married again, and the next husband says, "Why were you divorced?" "Oh, I just burned some toast." "Yeah, I bet you did." See, and so she's going to have some protection that is in there. So Moses said, "You have to give her this bill of divorcement." Now, here's what Jesus goes ahead to say then. He said, now, it hadn't been true from the beginning. It's not the way God wanted it. He did this for the hardness of your heart. But I say unto you, now then, he's going to explain what the truth is. I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And he that marrieth her, when she's put away, committeth adultery. So now, Jesus answers the question. He's telling them what the situation really is. Instead of him saying yes or no, he has come down now, and he has made a statement, and the answer is no. No, you can't put her away for every cause. Well, why did Moses then tell us to give her a bill of divorcement? And Jesus didn't say, he said to give her a bill of divorcement and divorce her for every cause. Jesus is going to tell them, this is the only reason that you can divorce your wife under the law of Moses. That's what he was living under. And the only reason you can do it is for fornication, if she commits adultery. So what Jesus is doing, he's answering the question, this age-old question of who's right. Is it Hayel or is it Shammai? Is it yes or no? Is it that we can put our wives away for every reason as long as we give her a bill of divorcement? Or is there a restriction on that? And Jesus says there is a restriction on that. You cannot do that. If you do it, you commit adultery. Now, we might skip over to Deuteronomy 24, if you want to open your Bibles there. And the key, this scripture that they're going to be arguing about, is found there in the first few verses of this. And it says this, when a man taketh a wife and marrieth her, then it shall be, if she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some unseemly thing in her. Now the key word, the big argument was over unseemly thing. Does anybody else have a different wording in your translation? Philip? What? Indecency. Anybody else got another one? A third one? An uncleanliness. Okay. Anybody got another one? Okay. We see we're on the same page here. But now this unseemly thing, this doesn't say adultery, does it? See, as you read that, it doesn't say if he has found some adultery in her. So this is what caused the argument when he said some unseemly thing. These Jews were arguing about this. These brilliant rabbis were arguing, and I think it's kind of unique to understand. This was written in their language. It was written in their language, and one guy says it's an unseemly thing, and it could be something other than adultery, and so that's what he's talking about. The other one says no, it is adultery that's here. So the whole point is over this unseemly thing. Now, Jesus comes along, and Jesus is going to give them the answer. Now, before we go any farther, let me say this. That word in the Hebrew Bible is used for some type of a I don't even know how to put the word in. I don't know the word that I'm after. I'm going to say sexual impropriety. I'm going to use that word. Now, there's another term. The reason I'm hesitating is there's another term or another way that it is used, and it's used in this way. The word nakedness would be a good word that you could put in there almost every time. We're told that the land of Israel, it wasn't guarded. It didn't have guards around it at a certain period of time. And it says that it was naked. And it's this word right here. The land of Israel was not covered. It was not guarded. The enemy could penetrate it. They could come in. So the word is used even to describe a nation that doesn't have its borders covered. In Leviticus 18th chapter, it's used over and over and over again for illicit sex acts. God prohibits a man to go in and uncover the nakedness of his sister, or uncover the nakedness of his mother, or uncover the nakedness of his aunt. And it goes on down through all of his relatives that you cannot uncover the nakedness of, and that's the word, that nakedness, that I can't uncover that nakedness. That's the word that is used here. It says one time that a man cannot uncover the nakedness of his mother because her nakedness belongs to his father. And so it gives you the connotation that you begin to see that it has sexual Anybody got a good word to put in there? It has a sexual connotation to it of either the sex act itself or inappropriate exposure of some kind or another. That's the idea that it had. Another way that it's used, and it's used in about these three different ways, is that this is kind of touchy to talk about, but as the children of Israel were going through the wilderness, they had to use the bathroom. And so God told them, he said, I want everybody to take a shovel with you, and when you go out, you dig a hole and you bury your excrement so that it will not be seen, so that its nakedness will be covered up. So, and so that don't leave that repulsive thing sitting around. Cover it up. And that's the word that is used here. So this exposure that's there. So it's inappropriate exposure in some way or another. Now, even in the Old Testament, I don't know how they ever got burning toast out of it, except I don't know how the rabbis got a lot of things out of a lot of things that we've already talked about, about the Sabbath and eating and so forth and so on like that. So the word then, I guess you could say, what Moses is saying here, unless he has found some sexual impropriety in her. Now, then, if he has, then he writes her a bill of divorcement and sends her out of his house. Then when she goes out of his house, when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter man hate her and write her a bill of divorcement and give it in her hands and send her out of the house, or if the latter husband die who took her to be his wife, her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife. So Moses put this stipulation on it. You can never take her back again, regardless of what happens. So this is going to be a permanent solution if you use it. Now, they're coming to Jesus. One group says, you can put her away for every reason. One group says, it's only for adultery. They ask him. Jesus said, haven't you read what God said? God made them male and female, and he glued them together. Said, you're glued together. If God glued you, don't break it up. So the answer is no. Well, then why did Moses? Now the implication is, why did Moses then say, we can put her away for every reason? Just give her a bill of divorcement, is the idea that they wanted in that. This is where Jesus then comes back, and where he says, it's never been that way. It's never been God's desire. Here, it seems to me, is this. From the very beginning, God made man and woman. One man, one woman. And he wanted us to stay together. That until death do you part. And he never permitted men to just go out and divorce their wife for every reason then. And it's only for adultery. In the law of Moses, only for adultery. In the New Testament, only for adultery. See? From the very beginning on down, God's never authorized this promiscuous situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a law that they made for slaves. Of when you take a country and then you have a slave woman, then you can do this. Now, I don't have all those laws in my mind, but he's also said that if you marry a slave and then you decide that you don't, no, it's give her to your son. That's good. Okay. I was thinking of this other over here. No, yeah, so you can take her. This is a law that they had for the the women of other countries. And there's no doubt that that's what they could do.
So then there was ways that you could get a divorce. There were exceptions to that divorce for only one.
For other countries, not between two Jews.
Okay.
Yeah. See, that's what I understand. And God always made laws about slaveries, of how you treated them. You can't treat your Jewish brethren in the same way in various things. So, yeah, I'd say between two Jews, no. See, there's no way you can do it. So, Jesus is saying then that it's because of the hardness of your heart. Now, that terminology, hardness of heart, again, is an interesting terminology. And we misunderstand it, I think, when we think God did it because of hardness of the heart. I know I did. Jump to conclusion. These people had such a hard heart that God said, well, if they're going to do it anyway, if they're going to have such a hard heart, I'll let them get a divorce and give her writing a divorcement. See? In other words, God kind of buckling under to the situation because of your hardness of your heart. He let you do something that He didn't intend to be done. But now, that kind of sounds funny because when you try to find other times of where God does that, it doesn't work, does it? In other words, God's always God, and you're going to obey me, see? He gave him a king, but it wasn't in violation of a law. It's kind of like my wife. I like to go to Chinese dinner. She wants to go to Mexican, so I'll buckle under and take her to Mexican in there. No, God didn't want them to have a king. But He gave them a king, and then He explained why He did that. In other words, God reasons with people. I'm not saying that God always gets His way. God gives in, but not to sin. See, not to violation of law. Not where God has set a law. God hadn't set a law on this. Now, God didn't want them to ask for a king. And God had told them, He said, now, if I give you a king, here's what will happen. And they said, we want a king. So then He goes ahead and tells them, okay, give them a king, and they're going to see what happens. In other words, we're going to teach them a lesson. And so it was a teaching, a lesson situation that's in there. It's quite a difference in a father that lets a son go do something where he knows he'll get in trouble. Okay, go ahead and do it. Know you get in trouble. And in a father saying, well, okay, under this circumstance, I will endorse robbing a bank, or I will endorse breaking a law. That's not what God did. So you say, well, what could the hardness of heart be? Well, if it's not toward God, and we just jump to that conclusion. Nowhere does it ever say that. But if it's not toward God, could it be toward their wives? In other words, these guys have such hard hearts toward their wives that they will not get along with them. Let me pull something up here and look at some things here on hardness of heart. I'm going to go through this. So here we just ask the question, is it against God or is it against fellow man? Now, the men had hard hearts. They did bad things to their wives. Back in Malachi, and this is another thing you do. You cover the altar of the Lord with your tears and with weeping and groaning because He no longer regards your offerings or accepts it with favor from your hand. Yet you say, for what reason? Because the Lord has been a witness between you and your wife, the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously, though she's your companion, your wife. In other words, in these marital troubles in here, they had a lot of problems. Look up here, so I put that up in red. This is another thing. You cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping, and with groaning. Now, this would have to be the tears of the wives. In other words, the wife's coming down and grabbing a hold of the altar and crying and weeping and groaning for the way that their husbands treated them. So, we're talking about some pretty mean guys in here. Now, as they're dealing with their wives, let's look at some other things. Here's the way hard-heartedness is used in the New Testament. In Mark 6, we've already studied these. And he went up into the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered. For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. Now, who's he talking about there? It's the 12 apostles, isn't it? And right after Jesus had performed this miracle of feeding all these 5,000, he gets in a boat, they get in the boat and going out, and then he comes on out and walking on water and so forth, and they hadn't considered this. They hadn't considered it because their heart was hard. What does that mean? Those 12 apostles were sitting in there, and they were amazed when Jesus calmed the storm because their heart was hardened. They should have been able, why should they have been able to say when he calmed the storm, oh, that's nothing, that's fine? They should have been able to say that. On what basis? On what they've seen him do. Why didn't they say it? Their heart was hardened. Does that mean that they were mean, vicious, dishonest, ungodly, immoral, robbers? No. It hadn't penetrated up here yet. Hadn't penetrated up here yet. Have you ever been called a hardhead? How many times have I told you? You're just a hardhead. Eh? It hadn't penetrated. That's all that means up here. Then another one in Mark 8. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have no bread. And when Jesus heard it, he saith unto them, why reason ye among that ye have no bread? Perceive ye not and understand? Have ye your heart yet hardened? Now this is where they were going, and Jesus said, beware of the leaven of the scribes and the leaven of the Pharisees. And they said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. I'll bet, Lord, we didn't even bring any bread. You remember that? And Jesus said, is your heart yet hardened? Was he rebuking them for immorality? They hadn't conceived, they hadn't understood, they hadn't perceived yet in this. Again, afterwards he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them with unbelief. Now this is after his resurrection, and they had all that evidence, yet they were in there, and he comes up to them, and he upbraided them, he bawled them out with their unbelief and hardness of heart. They still had hardness of heart. Now here these poor guys, they're sitting in there eating, they're brokenhearted. The news is that Jesus is risen from the dead. Peter and John's run out to the tomb. The tomb's empty. The women have said, we've talked to him. And they're sitting there saying, my oh my, 2 men come in from Emmaus and said, we saw him on the road. And they're sitting there thinking, wonder if he's really raised from the dead. Wonder if he's really raised from the dead. See? Well, Jesus said, that's because of hardness of heart. What does he mean by it? See? They couldn't accept it. It was too much for them. They couldn't accept the truth even when it was shown to them in there. And then with Isaiah, it said, he hath blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, that they should not see with their eyes nor understand with their heart and be converted, and I should heal them. So it's talking about understanding certain would conceive of is this. We're talking about, can you put your wife away for every cause? And the answer is no. No, you can't do it. Well, why did Moses say you give her a bill of divorcement? Well, he said it's on the basis of fornication. It's on the basis of fornication. That's the only reason here that you can do it. And God only did that because of the hardness of your heart. Now,